بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So باب النكاح. باب الرجل تكون عنده نسوة كيف يقسم بينهن. How a man who has a number of wives should apportion his time between them. So a very important thing to understand is that the ulama disagree whether or not polygamy is recommended. When they say that, this is not something that it's not in the same way that we understand it, right? So I don't know how things are in throughout the whole world, but being a Westerner and being in the West, the picture is that monogamy is the default, and anything else is something just very, very strange and just totally foreign to the whole husband-wife relationship. Like it's just something really, really strange. Doesn't really make any sense at all. But we have to understand if we read the verse, right? وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. If you are concerned that you will not be fair, then wahida. So Imam Shafi says it's better not to have more than one wife. Right? So it's khilaf al-awla. It's not sunnah in the Shafi school unless you have a particular intention, something else, right? It's not sunnah. However, then it says, "O ma malakat aymanukum," or ma, anything that your hand owns, your right hand owns, meaning concubines. So the idea that it's monogamy in the way that we see things is very different. So the paradigm of the Quran is a polygynous paradigm. It's like, so Imam Shafi, for example, he didn't have two wives, he had one wife, but he had a concubine. So Sayyidina Ibrahim, one wife and a concubine. I don't know about Imam Malik and the others, but so it is important, right? Regardless of social realities, regardless of people's abilities, regardless of whatever, it's important that we know what the deen is, right? So I remember once there was a sheikh, I believe Sheikh Nuh Ali Salman, the former Mufti of Jordan. He stood up and he gave a khutbah and he said, we are not Christians, by the way. Like, polygamy is halal. Right? Not, I don't think he was polygamous, but he's like, we are, remember we're not Christian, like, because it's almost the deen becomes changed, right? When it became such a strange thing, such an awkward thing, right? So it's important to understand that the structure. One of my friends and teachers, he says he reminds he's not wealthy at all, and he says, he reminds his wife in a not in any condescending or torturing way. Obviously, people some men are very immature. They're like, oh, I'm going to get a second wife, ha ha. It's like, it's really not a funny thing to say, right? Um, but anyway, so he reminds his wife every year. It says, I remind you and myself that I am muqassir, I'm falling short, and I'm not doing what I should do by not having a second wife. So I believe, like, he said, I think it's like it's recommended even if you don't have the money or something like that. Like, even if you can't afford it, you couldn't afford to pay two rents, whatever, it's still recommended. So, he's like, just from the point of making sure the deen is known, right? Making sure that the deen is known. أخبرنا مالك حدثنا عبد الله بن أبي بكر عن عبد الله بن أبي بكر بن حارث بن هشام عن أبيه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حين بنى بأم سلمة قال لها حين أصبحت عنده ليس بك على أهلك هوان إن شئت سبعت عندك وسبعت عندهن وإن شئت ثلثت عندك ودرت قالت ثلث. Right. So so Malik informed us. He said, Abdullah ibn Abi Bakr narrated to us from Abdul Malik ibn Abi Bakr ibn Harith ibn Hisham that when the Prophet ﷺ first went to see Salama on their wedding, he said to her when she had spent the night with him, "It is not that you are held in low esteem by your husband, but right. So, i.e., so she is so with the exception only of." only of Aisha radiallahu anha. All the Prophet's wives are previously married. So he's marrying somebody who has been previously married. So what happens now? It says, if you wish, I will spend 7 nights with you, and then 7 nights with each of them. So I have to do qada. And if you wish, I will spend 7 nights with 3 nights with you, and then visit each of them in turn. So she said, make it three. Right? So this is a non-virgin, okay? قال محمد بهذا نأخذ ينبغي أن ينبغي إن سبع not أن سبع ينبغي إن سبع عندها أن تسبع عندهن لا يزيد لها عليهن شيئا وإن ثلث عندها أن يثلث عندهن وهو قول وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. So he said, Muhammad says, we adhere to this. He ought, if he spends 7 nights with her, to spend 7 nights with each of them, of the wives, and and um, not give her any extra time over them. And if he spends 3 nights with her, i.e., is a new wife, but who has previously been married, then spend 3 nights with each of them. That is a verdict from Abu Hanifa, right? So the case with the virgin though is a 7. She can have 7 days. So he's trying to say it's not because of you. It's not like, oh, I don't want to hang out with you, but it's just this is the rule with a non-virgin. So a virgin 7 days, and otherwise, um, otherwise it is. Excuse me, my camera keeps turning off. Why is it doing this? Okay. So he says, okay. Then he says, باب أدنى ما يتزوج الرجل عليه المرأة. So the least dowry for which a woman may be married. أخبرنا مالك حدثنا حميد الطويل عن أنس قال أن عبد الرحمن بن عوف جاء إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعليه أثر صفرة فأخبره أنه تزوج امرأة من الأنصار قال كم سقت إليها قال وزن نواة من ذهب قال أولم ولو بشاه. So Malik informed us from Humayd al-Tawil from Anas. So there's two people between Imam Malik and the Prophet for this hadith. Right? Because in Anas he died I think in 91. So I mean it wasn't that long. It's not like Imam Malik wasn't born that long after Anas. Um, that Abdurrahman ibn Auf came to the Prophet ﷺ with traces of yellow, i.e., it's a tradition they would do put saffron on something. And he told him that he had married a woman from the Ansar. He asked, How much did you send her as dowry? He answered, the weight of a date stone in gold. He told him, give a wedding feast, even if only with a sheep, i.e., one sheep would do. قال محمد وهذا نأخذ أدنى المهر 10 دراهم ما تقطع فيه اليد وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. Right, Imam Muhammad said, we adhere to this. The least possible dowry is 10 dirhams. Right, dirham is silver, which is that of which is that for which the hand of a thief may be cut off. It is also the verdict. This is also the verdict of Imam Hanifa and al-Fuqaha in general. So this is the bare minimum for the hand. For the Shafis, there's no bare minimum. باب ما لا يجمع الرجل بين المرأة وعم باب لا يجمع الرجل بين المرأة وعمتها في النكاح. A man must not unite a woman and her paternal aunt in marriage. right? So the principle is anybody who, if they were of different genders, okay, they will be a mahram to each other, then you can't marry them both, right? So here, for example, a woman and her aunt. So is your aunt a mahram to you? Yes. So therefore, a woman, you can't marry a woman and her aunt. Okay, what about are you a mahram to your cousin? No. Okay, could you marry two cousins then? You could marry two cousins, right? Okay, what about your brother and sister? Are they mahram? Yeah. So could you marry two sisters? No. Okay, what about you mahram to your father, to your mother? Yeah. Okay, so could you marry a woman and her mother? No, you can't do that. Okay, what about a woman and her daughter? You can't do that. Right. So anybody, if you were to put them together, if they were different gender, they would be mahrams. Right. Otherwise, you could. أخبرنا مالك حدثنا أبو الزناد عن عبد الرحمن ابن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال لا يجمع الرجل بين المرأة وعمتها ولا بين المرأة وخالتها. Right. Imam Malik informed us from Abu Zinad, from Abdul Rahman ibn A'raj, super sahih hadith. From Abu Hurairah, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, a man must not unite in marriage a woman and her paternal aunt, or a woman and her maternal aunt. قال محمد بهذا نأخذ وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. And Muhammad said we adhere to this, and this is the verdict of Imam of Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha in general. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا يحيى بن سعيد الأنصاري أنه سمع سعيد المصاري إن ينهى عن تنكح المرأة على خالتها أو على عمتها وأن يطأ الرجل وليدة من بطنها جنين لغيره. And so Imam Malik informed us that Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, the Qadi, informed us that he heard Sa'id al-Musayyib saying, forbidding a woman to be taken in marriage along with her maternal aunt and paternal aunt, as mentioned in the hadith, and that a man should have sexual intercourse with a female slave in whose womb is another's child. Right? So this is what's called istibra. So when you buy a concubine, when you buy a female, you cannot have relations with her until she's had one period. So obviously when she's pregnant, she's not going to have a period. Right? So you can't do that. قال محمد هذا نأخذ وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا رحمه الله. So he says we adhere to this, and this is the verdict of Imam Hanifa and our fuqaha in general. باب الرجل يخطب على خطبة أخيه. A man proposing to someone to whom his brother in Islam has already proposed. أخبرنا مسلم أخبرنا يحيى بن سعيد عن محمد بن يحيى بن حبان عن عبد الرحمن بن هرمز الأعرج عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لا يخطب أحدكم على خطبة أخيه. So Malik informed us that's Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari from Muhammad ibn Yahya ibn Habban from Abdurrahman ibn Hurmuz al-A'raj from Abu Hurairah. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, let none of you propose to someone to whom his brother has already proposed. قال محمد بهذا نأخذ وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا رحمه الله. Right, he says we adhere to this in the verdict. So you can't. So until until the engagement gets called off, you can't do that. It's haram. Now, what if they didn't call it off, and you married that person anyway? Is that marriage valid? It's valid. Okay, but it's haram. Yeah, I know, but it's still valid. So what's the relationship between as-sihha, validity, right, and nahi, and prohibition? What's the relationship? So we can say, depending on the usul that we're going to apply. According to the Hanafis, we're going to look at the essence of this contract. The essence of the contract is you did something haram, but the proposal had nothing to do with the contract. So the contract is valid, period. Right? And you're just harming somebody else in the process. Okay? Now, a similar kind of ish thing for the Malikis and Shafi'is, because this is, this harm is not directly involved at all. But for the Maliki, for the Hanbalis, this is important. So the Hanbalis, they will often hear the Hanbalis saying that النهي يقتضي الفساد مطلقا, right? They'll often hear the Hanbalis being quoted that a prohibition like this would indicate invalidity in an absolute sense, and that is not actually true. So for the Hanbalis, النهي يقتضي الفساد في العبادات مطلقا, right? Um, that in worship, the prohibition indicates invalidity in an absolute sense. But in mu'amalat, in financial transactions, لا يقتضي, right? إلا أن يتعلق به حق الله, right? Unless, for example, it applies to the right of Allah. So, for example, the Hanbalis, they will say, in this scenario, it's haram but valid. You can't. This is haram but valid, and many other scenarios like that. They will also say, for example, however, if you sold during Jum'ah, and again, you have to ask the Hanbalis what exactly that means, the details of it, but they say that's haram and invalid. Okay, why? Because there's the haqq of Allah that's involved. You can't do that. So it's a useful subtlety there. So this is an example of where the Hanbalis, they do agree with the Jumhur. It's a valid contract. باب الثيب باب الثيب أحق بنفسها من وليها, right? A woman who is no longer a virgin having more right concerning herself than her guardian, right? And then the opposite is the case. If she is a virgin, that she does not have a better right than her guardian concerning herself, meaning concerning her marriage. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا عبد الرحمن بن قاسم عن أبيه عن عبد الرحمن ومجمع بن يزيد ابن جارية الأنصاري عن خنساب ابنة خذام أن أباها زوجها وهي ثيب فكرهت ذلك فجاءت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فرد نكاحه. So Malik informed us that Abdul Rahman ibn Qasim informed us from his father, Abdul Rahman ibn Mujammi', the two sons of Yazid ibn Jariyah al-Ansari, that Khansa bint Khidam, that her father committed her in marriage when she was no longer a virgin, and she disliked it. So she went to the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, and he revoked her marriage. قال محمد لا ينبغي أن تنكح الثيب ولا البكر إذا بلغت إلا بإذنها فأما إذن البكر فصمتها وأما إذن الثيب فرضاها بلسانها زوجها والدها أو غيره وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. So he said, a woman who is no longer a virgin, and even a virgin who has reached puberty. So here's a key distinction. For the Jumhur, for the majority of scholars, the Shafis, Hanbalis, and Malikis, we say if she is a virgin, even if she's reached puberty, she cannot she is not a contractor. She's not a contractor. A woman in the Shafi school, for example, she's not a contractor in marriage. Nor is her consent relevant. Right? So if she explicitly says no, you can still marry her against her will. And this is the position of the majority of scholars. Right? So again, this is, we mentioned in the beginning, it's important for the deen to be known. Right? So should you apply that? No. The Shafi'is say you shouldn't apply that. Fine. But is it important to know that the majority of scholars hold that a woman could be married against her will if she hasn't reached, even if she's reached puberty, and if she's a virgin, if she's not, as long as she's a virgin, right? That's important to know that, right? The consent of the virgin is her silence. So here's the exception for the Hanafis. The Hanafis to say no, she has to have consent if she's reached puberty, right? But her consent can just be the absence of saying no, right? The consent of the previously married woman is her good pleasure expressed by her tongue. She has to verbally say it, right? Whether it is her father or somebody else who arranges for her marriage. This is the verdict for the Abu Hanifa and the Fuqaha in general. So in the Hanafi school, the female is the contractor. The father is an agent for her, right? Whereas for the Jumhur, a woman is not an agent, is not a contractor. She can't do the contract herself. باب الرجل يكون عنده أكثر من 4 نسوة فيريد أن يتزوج. A man having more than 4 wives and wishing to marry again. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا ابن شهاب قال بلغنا أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لرجل من ثقيف وكان عنده 10 نسوة حين أسلم الثقفي فقال له أمسك منهن 4 وفارق سائرهن. Malik informed us that Ibn Shihab informed us, said it reached us that the Messenger of Allah spoke to a man from Thaqif who had 10 wives. When the Thaqafi accepted Islam, he said to him, retain 4 of them and separate from the rest of them. قال محمد وبهذا نأخذ يختار منهن 4 أيتهن شاء ويفارق ما بقي. أما أبو حنيفة فقال نكاح ال4 الأول جائز والنكاح من بقي منهن باطل وهو قول إبراهيم النخعي. So Imam Muhammad, he said, we adhere to this. He must choose 4 of them, whichever of them he wishes, and separate from the remainder. As for Imam Hanifa, he has a different opinion. He said the marriage of the first 4 are valid, and the marriages of the remainder are invalid, i.e., you can't just choose whatever you want. So, which of them did you marry first? Okay, Layla, Fatima, Sarah, Khadija. Okay, those, and then thereafter, those are only ones valid. This is the fatwa of Ibrahim an-Nakhai, and this is the one adopted by Imam Abu Hanifa. But Imam Muhammad goes against Ibrahim an-Nakhai here, right? أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا ربيعة بن أبي عبد الرحمن أن الوليد سأل القاسم وعروة وكانت عنده 4 نسوة فأراد أن يبت واحدة ويتزوج أخرى فقال له نعم فارق امرأتك 3 وتزوج فقال قاسم في مجالس مختلفة. Malik informed us that Rabi'a ibn Abdurrahman told us that Al-Walid, and he had 4 wives, asked Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr and Urwa ibn Zubayr, because he wanted to sever relations absolutely from one of them, wanted to divorce one of them and marry another. So the 2 of them both said, yes, divorce your wife 3 times and marry, right? So the problem is, why 3 times though? What's the problem here? So you divorce your wife once, what can you do with her? Can you take her back? If you divorce your wife once, can you take her back? Adi Muhammad, can you hear me?
Yes, is that?
So if you divorce your wife once, can you take her back?
Yes, but
Yes, you
there are
can.
conditions, right?
Yeah, so you took her back. So now this person, he divorced his wife. He had 4 wives. He divorces one of them once, okay? Marries a 5th wife, and then takes the 4th one back. And has 5 wives. So they're telling him do it 3 times, so then it's over. So then it's not possible to have more than 4 wives. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
All right. So now, interestingly, Al-Qasim, he said, these divorces must take on separate occasions. Why is that very important? Why is that a very important quote today? What's the position of Ibn Taymiyyah on the 3 divorces?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So the former dhahib, They say that a threefold divorce counts even if it's in one sitting. So according to the former dhahib, you can divorce your wife threefold in one sitting. According to Ibn Taymiyyah, it doesn't count. It only counts as one. Okay, it only counts as one. And that's a position that is, promoted these days, and it's a major problem, and because it's basically against the consensus. Now here, Al-Qasim, he's saying this position, right? So Qasim Muhammad, he's saying, divorce her on separate occasions, so that you can be like, oh, it's actually separate, right? So this is the same position as Ibn Taymiyyah. قال محمد لا يعجبني أن يتزوج خامسة وإن بت طلاق إحداهن حتى تنقضي عدتها ولا يعجبني أن يكون ماؤه في رحم خمس نسوة حرائر وهو قول أبي حنيفة رحمه الله والعامة من فقهائنا رحمهم الله. Muhammad says we dislike the notion that he should marry a fifth even if he made an absolute divorce of one of them until her iddah is completed. What if her iddah isn't completed? Right? We dislike the notion that his sperm should lie in the wombs of five free women, and that he is and this is the verdict. So basically it's like it's a whole problem with lineage and these things. We don't like that idea at all. So is it haram? Is it this? I don't. Allahu A'lam. Um, okay. Babu ma yujibu as-sadaq. What is considered dukhul? Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that there is that if you have dukhul, if you have entered upon them, right? Or if you have and tamassuhunna, or if you touch them, then the full dowry is due. And if you don't touch them and then divorce them, then the half the dowry is due. So what does it mean to touch them? Or does it mean to have dukhul? What does it mean? He says أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا شهاب عن زيد بن ثابت قال إذا دخل الرجل بامرأة وأرخيت الستور فقد وجب الصداق. So Malik informed us from Ibn Shihab that Zayd ibn Thabit said, when a man goes to his wife and the veils are let down over the two of them, i.e. they are alone, then the dowry is obligatory. That's considered dukhul, i.e. it's not intercourse. So when you say the husband and wife were, when they consummated the marriage, they were, what does it mean? It means they were alone. That's it. Okay, so the point is, it's just so they have to just be alone. According to Imam Shafi'i, it's not al-massan, it's a masisan. It means intercourse. So in the Shafi'i school, unless they have intercourse, then that is not considered. Then there's no mahar yet. So they were alone for 2 days in a room, and then he divorced her. They didn't have intercourse. There's only half the mahar is due. Only half the mahar is due, right? And subhanAllah, this happened. One of my teachers mentioned this scenario. So there was a young man. He gets married, and um, he is with this woman for 6 months. Okay, and uh, and during that time, he's divorced his wife hundreds of times. Okay, so now this man's friend comes to my teacher and says, "Look, this is what happened with my friend. He got married, then he was with this wife for like 6 months, and he's like divorced her 50,000 times. I don't know, hundreds of times. I don't know, like what's the deal?" So the sheikh says, ask him if he has had intercourse with her. And he's like, well, of course. I mean, they've been together 6 months. So ask him. And they hadn't. So what does that mean in the Shafi school? In the Shafi school, a threefold divorce doesn't count before intercourse. You can't do a threefold divorce. So that means when he divorced her the first time, she was divorced, and that's it. So that means they're not even married. They're together, but they're not married. If they want to they want to get married again, they get married again. Right? Um, so these things are important to come up. Okay, so anyway, so in the Shafi school, it is when you say dukhul, when the marriage is consummated, it is what's it called? It is through intercourse. For the Hanafi school, it is through Mini being alone. So it says here, Malik informed us, Ibn Shihab informed us that Zayd ibn Athar said, when a man goes to his wife and the veils are let down over the two of them, then the dowry is obligatory. قال محمد وهذا نأخذ وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. Then he mentions the Maliki school, or Imam Malik anyway. He says قال مالك بن أنس إن طلقها بعد ذلك لم يكن لها إلا نصف النهر إلا نصف المهر إلا أن يطول مكثهما ويتلذذ منها فيجب الصداق. So Imam Muhammad says we adhere to this, and this is the position of Imam Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha in general, i.e., just merely being alone, that's all that counts. Malik ibn Anas said, if he divorces her after that, then he only has to pay has half of the dowry, unless she remains some time, i.e., the two of them remain together, and he has pleasure from her. So there's some kind of sexual behavior, but other than intercourse, in which case the full dowry is obligatory. So this we're going to see later on in the Maliki and Hanafi school is the significance of sexual activity with somebody. In the Shafi school, there's no repercussions for anything other than intercourse. So just like if you, the had of zina, zina is only zina if zina happens. Anything else is not considered zina, right? There's no actual intercourse, it's not considered zina. Similarly, touching somebody with lust does not, for example, make somebody a mahram, right? Whereas in the Shafi and Maliki and Hanafi school, it can do, right? So if somebody is sexually intimate but not doesn't have intercourse with somebody, then that person is considered, then that person's child is kind of a mahram, etc. So you could, like, may Allah protect us all. If someone's father, for example, yeah, let's say, for example, this happened. If someone's father married a woman, had some sexual activity with her other than intercourse, okay, then that woman becomes a mahram to this man's son, right? Whereas in the Shafi school, it's not like that. So as long as it's not, um, no, that's not a good example because that's with marriage. There's no marriage. May Allah protect us. A man's father had a sexual relationship with a woman outside of marriage. Now this man wants to marry that same woman with whom his father had a sexual relationship other than intercourse. That woman is that woman is now mahram to him. Can't marry her. Right? So for the Shafis though, it's not like that. It's through marriage itself. Okay. The shigar marriage. So what is the issue of shigar? So dowry is something that follows marriage. It is not an integral of marriage. However, however, it is essential that the marriage you don't stipulate that the marriage that the nikah that the dowry goes to the wrong person, right? So shigar marriage is where, as it's going to mention in a second, it says here أخبرنا مالك أخبر نافع عن ابن عمر أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى عن الشغار والشغار أن ينكح الرجل رجل ابنته على أن ينكحه الآخر ابنته ليس بينهما صداق. Okay, so so Malik informed us from Nafi Abdullah ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah forbade shigar. And shigar is that the man marry off his daughter or his sister on the condition that the other marry him, his daughter or his sister, without their payment of dowry. So basically, they're canceling each other out. So effectively, the dowries are going to the men. So you can't do that. So a man could marry another man's daughter, and that man could marry the other man, the first man's daughter, but the mahar's got to go to the daughters. You can't just cancel each other out. قال محمد بهذا نأخذ لا يكون الصداق نكاح امرأة فإذا زوجها على أن يكون صداقها أن يزوجه ابنته فالنكاح جائز ولها صداق مثلها من نسائها ولا وكس ولا شطط وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. So Imam Muhammad says we adhere to this. A dowry cannot be in the form of marriage to another woman. If he does marry her off on the condition that her dowry should be that the other person marry his daughter to him, then the marriage is valid. Notice here it's valid, right? But she receives the dowry, which would normally be due to a woman of her standing. So the Shafi'i school say this is not a valid marriage. Whereas for the Hanafis, they're saying, is it essentially a marriage? Yes. Okay, fine. So all the integrals are there, it's valid. However, because the mahar was invalid, we have to give her mahar mithl. We have to give what her normally she would receive. Neither less nor more. This is the verdict of Imam Abu Hanifa and our fuqaha. Whereas for the Shafis, they say the marriage is not valid, period. باب نكاح السر, a secret marriage. أخبرنا مالك عن أبي الزبير أن عمر أتي برجل في نكاح لم يشهد عليه إلا رجل وامرأة فقال عمر هذا نكاح السر ولا أجيزه ولو كنت تقدمت فيه لرجمت. So Malik informed us from Abu Zubayr that Umar was brought a man for whose marriage the only witnesses had been one man and one woman. So you need to have two men for a witness. And Umar said, "This is a marriage conducted in secret, and we do not have regard for it. We do not regard it as valid. It had been the first, if I had been the first to be involved in it, you would have been stoned." So قال محمد وبهذا نأخذ لأن النكاح لا يجوز في أقل من شاهدين وإنما شهد على هذا الذي رده عمر رجل وامرأة فهذا نكاح سري لأن الشهادة لم تكمل ولو كملت الشهادة برجلين أو رجل وامرأتين كان نكاحا جائزا وإن كان سرا وإنما يفسد النكاح السري أن يكون بغير شهود أما إذا كملت فيه شهود فهو النكاح العلانية وإن كانوا أسروه. Right? So Muhammad said, we adhere to this because marriage is not valid with less than two witnesses. And in this case, in the case that Umar rejected, the only witnesses were a man and a woman. So this is a marriage conducted in secret because the witness is not complete. So the question is, what's the illah? Why is it haram? Is it because it's secret or is it because there's no witnesses? The answer is because there's no witnesses. So could it be secret? Yeah, it can be secret. If the witnessing had been complete by two men or a man and two women in the Hanafi school, in the Shafi school, you cannot have. You can do that in financial issues. You can't do that in marriage. In marriage, you have to have two men. Then it would have been a valid public marriage because the definition of public is that there's witnesses, and the definition of secret is that there's no witnesses. Right? قال محمد أخبرنا محمد بن أبان عن حماد عن إبراهيم أن عمر الخطاب أجاز شهادة رجل وامرأتين في النكاح والفرقة. Muhammad, he's now bringing his own chain. So presumably the Malikis agree with us as well, the Shafis, that you cannot have two women in the place of one man in a marriage contract. So Muhammad said, Muhammad ibn Aban informed us from Hamad. I'm not sure which Hamad this is. Perhaps Hamad ibn Salama or Muhammad ibn Abi Sulaiman. Allahu Alam. I don't think it's Hamad ibn Zayd. From Ibrahim al-Nakhai. Oh, this is Hamad ibn I believe his name is Ibn Abi Sulaiman. Right? So Imam Abu Hanifa had a choice of going studying with the Muhaddithin or with the Fuqaha. And he studied with the Fuqaha. Right? He studied with Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman because he's a faqih. From Ibrahim al-Nakhai. That gap in the chain here. That Umar al-Khattab regarded the witnessing of a man and two women as being valid for marriage and divorce. So why? Because in marriage and divorce, there's financial issues. So it's analogous to what? It's analogous to in the Quran about a man and two women in financial issues. It's not analogous though because there's also lineage, right? قال محمد بهذا نأخذ وهو قول أبي حنيفة رحمه الله. Muhammad said we adhere to this and it's the verdict of Imam Abu Hanifa. باب الرجل يجمع بين المرأة وابنتها وبين المرأة وأختها في ملك اليمين. A man uniting sexually a woman and her daughter or a woman and her sister under his ownership through milk yamin, through as concubines. أخبرنا مالك حدثنا الزهري عن عبيد الله بن عبد الله بن عتبة عن أبيه أن عمر سئل عن المرأة وابنتها مما ملكت اليمين توطأ إحداهما بعد الأخرى قال لا أحب أن أجيزهما جميعا ونهاه. Right. So Imam Malik informed us from Zuhri, from Ubaidullah ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah, from his father that Umar al-Khattab was asked about a woman and her daughter under ownership, as to whether intercourse could be had with one of them after the other. He said, I dislike the notion of making both of them valid together. But you can't do that. So I guess the issue here is what? Is the family ties. When that happens, it creates a nafra, creates a um, um, negative feeling between these two people. So two people, and the mother daughter tie is more important than that. Now, what does that tell us? This tells us that the Sharia has confessed that there's harm in polygamy. Right? So the fact that the Sharia doesn't allow you to marry two sisters, that means there is some negative feelings between the two co-wives, right? If that were not the case, or were not often the case, then why would that be why would the Sharia not forbid it? Why would the Sharia forbid marrying two sisters, or a mother and a sister and a daughter? So that means the Sharia confesses and accepts that there is harm in polygamy. So then why does the Sharia allow it?
Um, it could be the benefit, the
Yeah.
benefits as well.
So would the Sharia allow something that there's harm in if there's less benefit or if there's more benefit?
More benefit.
Right? So this is a key thing to understand. There is harm in wearing hijab. It is uncomfortable, but there's more benefit in it. There is harm in praying 5 times a day. It wastes time where you could be working, but there's more benefit in it. There is benefit in drinking alcohol, but there's more harm in it. There's harm in fasting. You get hungry, but there's more benefit in it. Every single thing in the Sharia, there's benefit and harm. And the Sharia says, yeah, there's more benefit than harm, or more harm than benefit. So that's how it works. So it's not true to say, oh, but there's harm in it. It's true to say, yeah, there is harm in it, but there's more benefit. Um, باب الرجل يجمع بين المرأة وابنتها وبين المرأة وأختها في ملك اليمين. A woman uniting sexually a woman. We mentioned that, right? أخبرنا مالك عن الزهري عن قبيصة بن ذؤيب أن رجلا سأل عثمان عن عثمان عن الأختين مما ملكت يمينه هل يجمع بينهما فقال أحلتهما آية وحرمتهما آية ما كنت لأصنع لذلك ما كنت لأصنع ذلك ثم خرج فلقي رجلا من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فسأله عن ذلك فقال لو كان لي من الأمر شيء ثم أتيت بأحد فعل ذلك لجعلته نكالا قال ابن شهاب أراه عليا رضي الله عنه. Right, so Malik informed us from a Zuhri, informed us from Qabisa ibn Dhu'ayb that a man asked Rahman about two sisters he owned, whether he could unite them, could he sleep with both of them? He said, one ayah makes it halal because it says Ma malakat aymanukum, and the other ayah makes it haram, which says you can't have the two sisters. So I would not do it. Right, this is a qaida fiqhiyah. Right, this is a legal principle. Something says halal, something haram, you can't do it. You can eat horses, but you can't eat donkeys. Okay, can you eat a mule?
Um, I mean, I don't know the difference.
Yeah, so a mule is a half the horse, half donkey.
Oh,
Yeah, so you can't. Why? Because one thing makes it halal, the other thing makes it haram, so therefore it's haram, right? If you
right.
had a half dog, half wolf, would it be najas? Yes. If you had, so whenever you have something saying something's halal, something saying it's haram, then it's haram, right? So that's a qaida fiqhiyya, key principle. So he says, then he went out and he met a man who was one of the Sahaba, and according to Mr. Ron, he asked him about it, and he said, if I had any authority, and then someone who did what was that was brought to me, I would make an exemplary punishment out of him. Ibn Shihab said, I think that was Ali. Sayyidina Ali, right? So you don't do that. قال محمد بهذا كله نأخذ لا ينبغي أن يجمع بين المرأة وابنتها ولا بين المرأة وأختها في ملك اليمين. Right? You can own both of them, you just can't sleep with both of them. قال عمار بن ياسر ما حرم الله من حرائر شيئا إلا وقد حرم من الإماء مثله إلا أن يجمعنا رجل يعني بذلك أن يجمع ما شاء من الإماء ولا يحله فوق 4 حرائر وهو قول أبي حنيفة رحمه الله. Just we adhere to this, right? One ought not unite a woman and her daughter, nor a woman and her sister who are under one's ownership, i.e., by having intercourse with them. Ammar ibn Yasir said, whatever Allah forbids with respect to free women, He forbids with respect to slave women, except that a man collects them, meaning that he may have as many slave women as he wants, but it is not. But it's permissible for him but it's not permissible for him and to have more than 4 wives. And that is a verdict of Imam Abu Hanifa. Right? And Sufyan al-Thawri is narrated by Ibn Habib in his book Adab al-Nisa. He says there is no israf in women. So is that worldly? Like, oh, shouldn't do that. No, it's not world. It's not israf, like having a big car, big house for no reason, etc. But in women, there's no israf in that, right? To have 4 wives and as many female slaves, there's no israf in that. Like you're doing something that is recommended by the Sharia, not something um, that is simply permissible. A man who marries a woman and does not unite sexually with her because of some defect in the woman or in the man. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا ابن شهاب عن سعيد بن المسيب أنه كان يقول من تزوج امرأة فلم يستطع أن يمسها فإنه يضرب له أجل سنة فإن مسها وإلا فرق بينهما. Malik informed us that Ibn Shihab informed us that Sa'id Musayyab used to say, someone who marries a woman and is unable to have intercourse with her, then a period of a year is set for him. If he has intercourse with her, then the marriage is valid, and if not, they are separated. Right. So this is part of the haqq of a woman to have intercourse. A woman has a right to have intercourse, and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions that a man is obliged to sleep with his wife if he is able, as much as she needs. Right. So he can't willingly not sleep with her. It's haram to do that. Imam Ghazali mentions a similar thing in the Ihya. Um, and Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions a very poignant point, if that makes any sense. He says, it is آكد or أوكد حقوقها, right? من أوكد, it's like her most emphasized right. Right, her most emphasized right is for that, right? There's nobody else that can sleep with her other than the husband. So if he doesn't do it and he's able to, then, right, it's a problem. Um, and similarly, if he's not able to, then she raises it to court. She raises it to court and says, this issue, and then he's given a year, and if not, then she can annul the marriage. قال محمد هذا نأخذه قول أبي حنيفة رحمه الله إن مضت سنة ولم يمسها خيرت فإن اختارته فهي زوجته ولا خيار لها بعد ذلك أبدا. Right. وإن اختارت نفسها فهي تطليقة بائنة. وإن قال إني قد مسستها السنة إن كانت ثيبا فالقول قوله مع يمينه. وإن كانت بكرا نظر إليها النساء فإن قلنا هي بكر خيرنا بعدما تحلف بالله ما مسها. وإن قلنا هي ثيب فالقول قوله مع يمينه. آه لقد مسستها وهو قول أبي حنيفة والعامة من فقهائنا. So now he's going to go into some fiqh here. She says, we adhere to this, and this is the verdict of Imam Hanifa. If a year passes and he has had not intercourse with her, then she is given the choice. If she chooses him, then she is his wife, and she never again has a choice after that. So this is the issue of the anin, somebody who is incapable of having intercourse. Okay, what if now she does have intercourse, but later on he's not able to have intercourse? Or she chooses yes, but then later on, then no. This is a separate issue. That's something else which she could raise to court and say, like, this is too difficult being married to somebody who cannot sleep with her. And that's another totally different issue. But as for this particular issue, that doesn't only applies once. In the beginning, that's it. Right? And this is in that case, here we go. If she chooses herself, to be free, then she is irrevocably divorced, is annulled. The marriage is annulled. He may say, I had intercourse with her during the year. In that case, if she had been previously married, i.e., there's no physical way to show that she's been married or not, his word is accepted if accompanied by an oath, right? The default is that we believe him. So he says, no, she can't, that's wrong. She can't choose to leave me. I had intercourse with her. And then he said, okay, swear by Allah that's the case. And he says, I swear by Allah that's the case, and khalas, end of case. If he doesn't swear by Allah, then we're going to ask her to swear by Allah. Swear by Allah that he didn't have intercourse with you. She says, I swear by Allah. Then she's going to win the case. Right? But the default is al-qawlu qawluhu. The default is he has to do it. Right? If she is a virgin, then the women examine her, and if they say she's still a virgin, then she is given the choice after having been required to swear an oath by Allah that he did not have intercourse with her. If they said she is no longer a virgin, then his word is accepted when accompanied by his oath that he definitely had intercourse with her. That and it. Hmm? That is the verdict of Imam Hanifa and our fuqaha in general. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا مجبر عن سعيد المسيب أنه قال أيما رجل تزوج امرأة وبه جنون أو ضر فإنها تخير إن شاءت قرت وإن شاءت فارقت. So Malik informed us from Al-Mujabbar that Sa'id Musayyib said, if a man marries a woman while he is in some mental problem or physical affliction, then she is given the choice. If she wishes, she settles the marriage, and if she wishes, she divorces. قال محمد إن كان امرأ لا يحتمل خيرت فإن شاءت قرت وإن شاءت فارقت وإلا لا خيار لها إلا في العنين والمجبوب. So it says إن كان أمر لا يحتمل. So if the matter is intolerable, like this is insane, the person's totally insane, she's given the choice. And if she wishes, she settles in the marriage, otherwise she doesn't. If not, if it's something else, then she only has exception in the case of impotence or castration. Right? He doesn't have functioning private parts, or he doesn't have private parts to begin with. Right? باب البكر تستأمر في نفسها. A virgin who is let's just finish with this chat, inshallah. This whole discussion is kind of one thing, so let's do this next week, inshallah. It's kind of one discussion, inshallah. Okay, وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.